I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the off-season, postseason, preseason basketball podcast. I'm Ben Detrick. Jordan Redaelli is back on vacation. Fortunately, Andrew Kuo is hard at work.
I wish I was on a sandy beach. A couple hot dogs.
Hot dog legs and a dog dish full of hypnotique. To the casual observer, it looks like vacation.
You know, like when people go on vacation being like, I just want to figure something out. I need to get away from everything. I need to go take myself out of what I think is causing my problem. They come back and I'm like, what'd you figure out? It's like, I love going on vacation. I'm going back.
I never take vacations I rarely take vacations in restful places. And one time I did, and I came back and I was like, I'm really recharged. And then a week later, no, I want to go back to that beach.
Yeah.
That was preferable to what I'm doing now.
That's an interesting debate. Do you go on vacation do you choose your vacation destinations for the culture, like food, museums, or do you choose it for a sandy beach and a nice swim?
Generally, I've been of the ilk that prefers vacation in cities. And
Yeah, you're the Mexico City Batman.
yeah, cultural epicenters of art and food and nightlife.
Miami's your spot, man. You're the Jimmy Butler of vacation planners.
I can't wait to go down there and play some dominoes, go to Versailles, eat some, I don't know, deep fried plantains, some pernil.
Stone crabs, and all that stuff. And then you turn around and it's the most beautiful beach I've ever seen. That beach is unbeatable, man.
South Beach,
It's incredible.
a place to take talents.
It's incredible, man.
Are you a city or rest and relaxation guy?
Totally city. I like to see, I like to go on museums. I like food. I go for food, number one. But then, I went to Portugal, Lisbon, to have the food. And they also have amazing sites and amazing places just to, chill. And I loved it so much. So I might be changing my tune.
I can't say I found Lisbon specifically restful because there's so many hills.
Oh,
You're
my God.
always walking up a hill. It's
Calves
so
are yoked.
non-restful.
But then when you get to the beach, it's amazing. I mean, it's kind of rocky and sandy, but when you go a little farther north from Lisbon to where the aquarium is, it's just huge expanses of water. It's tight. I love Lisbon, man.
I liked it too, but I would not characterize it as a restful city. But I liked it. It was good. It was good. I am wondering if I've been doing vacations wrong, though. I'm not saying there's a right way. I like seeing cities, but when you live in New York and you visit somewhere where you're trying to find a facsimile of New York, or at least their version of it, you end up with a sort of cultural homogeneity, which is oh, I'm going to find the coffee shop that's similar to the coffee shop that I go to in Brooklyn. I'm going to find the clothing store that sells something that's kind of like what I've heard of, or that someone from New York told me to go to. I'm going to go to this restaurant. Oh, you have to get a reservation at Contramar and it's, I don't know. There's something where I like cities, I like seeing them, but it feels like you're replicating what you're already doing.
Yeah, I want to go to the Tate to see a traveling exhibition that I saw in New York. It happens all the time. But I always try, I don't travel well at all. I'm so bad at it. But I always love the kind of the collecting aspect of it, trying to figure out what to take home and how to remember it. And taking pictures on the phone is the best way. But sometimes I'll buy stuff and I have a whole bookshelf of cookbooks from places that I've visited, just to kind of take me back there. Do you do that? Do you buy if you go to Lisbon, do you buy a cookbook about Portuguese food?
Do you buy them in their native tongue?
Well, I like to see
No tribo.
I like to see like what's around like old bookshops, but usually I'll come home and just like buy one in New York.
I have done that before. I wouldn't say I've done that recently, although my travels did convince my parents to send me a Portuguese cookbook.
Did you cook something from it to remind yourself of the trip?
I have not.
How come?
I didn't love the food in Portugal.
Wait. Okay, acceptable, but explain.
Look, it's good. It's good. But it was a lot of like jamon. It was a lot of
Seafood?
and I really did enjoy it. Like if you go to what's the place? Ramiro. Like wonderful, wonderful. Love that meal. There was a lot of little places I liked. Really good seafood and stuff, but it wasn't kind of up to date in the way
What about
of
croquetas or like egg tarts?
See, I like all that stuff, but Madrid's the same way. The traditional food in both those places is delicious, and I really like it. But I find myself not getting enough healthy stuff or enough diversity.
Oh, people outside of America don't really care about vegetables. Like Chinese people love vegetables, but like, yeah, Lisbon was tough on my stomach because I'm so used to like having a big ass salad, like at least once every 2 days. But I was just like eating like sardines off the street and like mussels and drinking like a glass of rosé as a tourist does. Not to say that like people from there eat like a tourist eats, but I was eating one of those egg tarts every day while I was there.
Oh, the little sweet ones?
They're amazing. And in China, they have like a similar thing. And all I had to do was Google it, and I didn't know there was like crossover with like colonialization and all that. So they come from the same vibe.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, though. The food is really good, but after a little while, you're like, actually, I just kind of want a fresh salad. I need to flip it up. I'm starting to ooze like shrimp oil from my pores.
4 days in after like sampling all the most delicious, affordable, amazing seafoods, we were like, we just really want pasta. Could we just get like a big loaf of bread and like some spaghetti with red sauce? Like we were just craving like what our body usually eats in America.
Right. And again, I think this is less besmirching the native cuisine of these fabled lands as much as it is when you're a tourist, you eat in restaurants and you eat in specific kinds of restaurants. You're not comfortable going to the supermarket, cooking what you normally cook. And I would assume it would be the same if you came to New York City. Granted, New York is more versatile in terms of where you could eat, but still, eating out in restaurants over the course of repeated days, your stomach gets fucked up.
Yeah.
It's a lot of salt. It's a lot of butter.
Yeah, a lot of fried stuff. Like at some point, my stomach kind of shut down on me in Portugal just because I was like, it was just like everything was a proxy to butter. Like, oh yeah, I want razor clams drenched in butter. I want shrimp drenched in butter. And by accident, my stomach just kind of like had enough. As you're taking out your butter, are you showing off your butter?
No, check this out, right? So this is
Vegan butter.
Miyoko's European-style cultured vegan butter made from plants. I have not opened it yet, but I've purchased it.
I buy everything vegan, fake, all that stuff. Like all fake
Have
meat.
you tried fake butter? I want to know if it's.
I have not tried it.
Yeah, I want to know if it's a reasonable alternative.
I have not found a good cheese yet, though. And I know in the Essex Market in the Lower East Side in New York, they have a full-on vegan cheese shop, but everything's like chalky and pasty. I haven't duplicated a nice gooey grilled cheese yet.
I'm totally comfortable swapping out milk for oat milk and all that other shit, but I do want to maintain cheese.
There's no solution
The
yet.
queso is sacred.
Yeah, man. I bought all the fake cheeses. They're not good. They don't melt right. They're kind of like chalky. I know. I'm really into all like the fake meat, like the arms race for fake meats right now is like super interesting. Beyond is okay. Impossible is just it's delicious.
I've only tried one of those, but I'm not sure which. I had a bite of someone's burger. I want to say it was Impossible because I feel like I heard
Were you
the
in a
phrase.
restaurant?
It was in a restaurant.
Probably Impossible.
I thought it was solid. It was edible. I'm pretty sure that eventually this is how we're going to view the ethical consumption of meat. It'll either be grown in like a petri dish or a lab, or it'll be fake meat.
Yeah, I'm not vegan
plant-based.
at all, but I try to like not eat meat 6 days a week, and I think a lot of ethicists, like smart nerds say on when they're asked is like what's going to seem ridiculous in 10 years, because every 10 years you look back and you're like, oh, that was ridiculous that we thought that worked, or that we thought that was acceptable, and it's feedlots and slaughter. It's just like, oh, we don't have to do it that way. We were doing it because we were lazy.
The treatment of animals, I think, will age very poorly. I also think just eating animals in general, I feel like there's some sort of tipping point in the future. I don't know what it'll be. It'll be like a talking cow. And like the talking cow, oh, be like, oh my God, cows can fucking talk.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
all of a sudden we're like, we can't have burgers anymore. Yeah. He'd be like, oh, I've lost so many of my friends. But you see like that clip that went viral of the two cows.
Yeah.
And like one's on a hill
The other one's
and like
jogging
waiting.
towards
The other
it.
one like races to catch up, and they go sashaying off
Into the
through
sunset,
through
literally.
the pasture.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, they have friends.
Oh my God, yeah.
They have affection for each other. They're waiting for each other to go hang. Like, we're just gonna cut them apart and eat them like these two chill cows.
Yeah.
It's not gonna age well. And this is coming from someone who eats meat and doesn't have that many compunctions about it. So I am being hypocritical, but I do acknowledge that it's wrong, and we should not actually be treating other living creatures in the way that we do.
Yeah, and people should just eat whatever they think fits in their, constitution. And I just decided to do this, but I'm not going to tell somebody not to eat a burger. But the stories about these animals is endless. Like, I know somebody who lived on a farm and had cows, and there was a boy and a girl baby cow, and she named them Jack and Rose after the Titanic. And they grew up to be big, like, meat cows, but every day after school, they would run to her. She would be like, Jack, Rose, and they would all run to her. They would both run to her as, like, pets, kind of, and she would chill with them for an hour every day. Like,
What was their fate?
burgers. They were just gone one day. And, like, as you get older, it gets more sad. Like, I'm into rescuing cats. I know it sounds crazy, but, like, I always have 2 rescues on hand, and they live for a long time, but if one of them tragically ages out, I get a friend for the other one. And I just got another one. It's like, there's not enough space in my house or money in my bank account to rescue enough of these guys. Like, every one of them needs a little bit of a nice life, I think.
I've been reading that book, Sapiens.
Mm-hmm. How is it?
It's interesting. I feel like there's a kind of brain revelation, if you will, on almost every page, at least thus far, where something is presented in a way that makes total sense that you may not have thought about before. For example, it discusses how the agricultural revolution was pretty much disastrous for humans, and he makes the argument that while we think we cultivated wheat, it was really that wheat cultivated us, and wheat had us now warding off predators and building fences and doing everything to propagate the species of wheat.
I've heard both sides of this argument. Not that all wheats matter, but also in our lifetime we've solved like world hunger, and there's communities that are still hungry, but that's political now. Like, there's enough actual food that's affordable where people aren't. And when we were growing up, that was a big issue, like Live Aid and all that, like feeding people who needed food. But now it's just like, if they're hungry, it's like a socioeconomic or political.
This book makes the argument that to get to where we are now, we needed the agricultural revolution. Wherever we are now, if we're going to call it good or bad, whatever, just this position of the globe and humanity. But it's like, for the most part, the agricultural revolution was a huge downgrade for everyone involved. Because prior to that, humans were these wandering tribes of hunter-gatherers. They'd move with the seasons. They were like kind of good. They were eating fruit off trees, hunting, just roaming.
But also dying younger.
But that was the thing, was like they were kind of sort of healthy, even though they were moving around. Right, you could get an infection, you just perish.
Or
But
falling off a cliff or
all that kind of stuff, gored by a boar, to 30 to 50 boars start goring you and your offspring.
Where's my automatic rifle? Where's my AK?
They didn't have that. But the thing is, once humanity settled down, there was all of a sudden diseases that would spread within communities very quickly. There were droughts that would just wipe you out. You were also tied to a house, which meant when marauders came by, you couldn't go anywhere. They would just roll in and destroy your shit and steal from you and whatever. And like life was pretty miserable for the first generations of farmers. Ironically, life is really miserable for farmers right now, and they have the highest suicide rate in America.
That's policy, though.
I mean, it depends on the industry. Like dairy farmers, just off of what we just were talking about, like the dairy industry is crumbling in front of us.
And also trying to stop buying stuff this week, and it really affects everybody. Like not in the future, but like in 24 hours.
Yeah, that's not going to help the whole.
Yeah, so it's policy. These are these little micro wars, and I think we've done really bad by some people in some occupations. Not to get all yang gang, but like this also affects trucking and like Walmart and all these things, right? But yeah, I mean, I subscribe to the idea that like we're living longer and healthier lives, and we have to keep on fixing things. And like, I can't see a huge egregious mistake that we've made, but we have to fix small mistakes. And I guess that's just like politics, like everything, like gun control. We just like flubbed that one.
Well, right. I was going to say, speaking of enormous policy mistakes, obviously the story that, traumatized America over the last week was a pair of mass shootings on the same day. And like, there's not really a lot of levity here, and many people lost their lives. But I think the overall tenor here is that, I guess there's two ways of looking at it. Let me rephrase that. You've got the idea that we can change this, and each of these events gets us closer to changing it. Or there's the more pessimistic viewpoint that once we didn't do anything after Sandy Hook, then this is just how it's going to be. Is there one of those two schools of thought in terms of perhaps solving our mass murder issues that you subscribe to?
Not shockingly, I feel like there's kind of truths in both. I don't think it's a pessimistic worldview or political view, but like I do kind of like hedge towards like Democrats and Republicans just kind of like go in circles a little bit, and like we don't really affect things, but things die out and get born, and like the NRA is running out of money. It's like not even, it's just observable. Like they just have no more money, so the effects of their donations will kind of have an observable effect moving forward.
But speaking on that, right? We see these lists of who the NRA has given money to, and obviously it's primarily Republicans who are the ones keeping our lack of gun control as a matter of law, whether it's on a state or national stage. Looking at those lists, it's remarkable how little money they're actually getting.
Like $3,000.
It's like Chuck Grassley got the cost of like a Sebring.
Yeah, that we know of.
You get like 2 Kias.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always shocking to me. Like, so-and-so donated to so-and-so. I'm like, no way, how much? It's like $700. I'm like, yeah.
I'm like, the NRA is allowing, Republicans are saying, we're cool with mass murder because we got $30K coming in. I'm like, I actually don't buy that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's based on the money they're getting from the NRA. I think it may be they fear what the NRA would say, but I think more truthfully, they actually believe the same shit as the NRA.
Yeah, totally. And like, not to get into like the weeds,
or their constituents believe the same as the NWA.
And to think that these
NRA.
to think that these payments that we could see on record are the only payments is kind of naive too. Like there was a couple scandals of just like, I'll give you a house. It's only worth 200,000 to you can use it indefinitely. And then you look at the house and that property in DC, like that's worth like $4 million, you know?
I mean, that's certainly possible. I just don't know.
Or like Varsity Blues, you know,
But
like
to
the
your-
whole scandal.
To your point, I don't know that the NRA has the financial muscle
Yeah.
to make the argument that it's just money. It's just monetarily based at this point.
Yeah.
I think it's probably also ideological.
And like, I try not to occupy my head with too much of this stuff because like it's truly heartbreaking. Like this weekend was like really sad. It was awful, and then everything gets kind of ground through like a lot of filters. And what helps me personally is to like not to belittle anything, is like put it through an MBA filter. Like how easy is change? Like what are we doing wrong that I can talk about without talking about like actual people dying? You know, it's just like the way we think as humans. And it's ironic that we try to find reasons for all this when maybe there isn't quite a specific reason, but it's like a simulation of the reason isn't the actual thing. For example, a simulation of warfare is causing this. And I'm like, no, actual warfare is causing this. You're putting guns in people's hands. That's just actuality, not the simulation of actuality.
You know, I think the Overton window needs to shift a little bit on gun control. And maybe that's what people are trying to do. If you can start the slippery slope to saying assault weapons are off the table, then you can go and you can keep making smaller incremental change. Why are any guns legal? Why? Give me a good reason that any guns are legal in America. Why?
I know we grandfather all these bad ideas into new ideas. So like No Sin Bin in the NHL, it's like, you guys need to start wearing helmets because like there's brain damage going on. But if you started in the NHL before a certain date, you don't have to wear them. I'm like, no, older people should absolutely be wearing helmets when they play this sport. So like grandfathering into something seems like a right, but it also seems like that choice should be obvious.
It's like, well, we've got to have guns,
Right.
rifles and pistols and stuff to protect your home and to hunt with. I'm like, why? No, you don't.
But
how about you don't get those things?
But to be devil's advocate, it's easy for us to say because we don't enjoy hunting or having guns, right? So,
But it is easy for me to say. My hobbies don't include owning weapons.
yeah, but the interns are like internet trolls maybe, or like shit posters. And someone might look at that and be like, you're spreading more bad vibes than just having a gun sitting and doing nothing.
Look,
I don't know. Devil's advocate only.
I hear you. I'm just saying if a meme about trusting the procedure ended up taking lives, I think I hope the interns would be willing to stop.
But there's a lot of guns that don't take lives.
But again, that's kind of the point, though, is like, why are we grandfathering that in? The idea that, well, you got to have hunting. Says who?
Yeah.
Says who? Get a crossbow.
Yeah.
You can hunt with a crossbow.
Yeah. Well, I don't drive because I'm a bad driver. I have a license. I can be on the streets right now, but I know in my heart I'm so bad at driving, therefore I don't do it.
But I grew up with two uncles, both of who are tragically dead at an early age. They were hunters. They hunted with guns. They hunted with crossbows. There would be venisons full of freezer. There would be venison sausage. They would pull up in a pickup truck with a deer strapped on the top.
Is venison good?
Yeah, it's a little gamey, though.
I've never had it. I like gamey stuff.
It's gamey. It's gamey. More than a gamey. But,
Daikon is a gamey vegetable.
yeah, I guess it is.
It's stinky.
But this was not completely unfamiliar with me. I'm not speaking totally as a coastal elite who's like, oh, hunting, what are you rubes doing? Like, I grew up around that stuff. It wasn't like my household, but it was my extended family. Right. We were certainly around it. It's not precious, man. I'm sorry. It's not precious. You can go fishing. You can go orienteering, play paintball, capture the flag. You can do other shit in the woods besides shoot animals.
I'm with you
Give
on...
up your stupid hobby if it means getting rid of guns. And that's not me even shitting on hunters, because hunting is not the problem here. It's guns. But let's get the argument that we need guns because of hunting off the table. And I actually feel bad for hunters because of what you're saying. Like, I don't really have an issue with it, but it does dovetail into this idea. Maybe we shouldn't be killing animals.
Yeah, and I have no answers for this, but also, like, how do you talk about this as like a cultural kind of what you perceive as a cultural right to do something you've done before? This month in Japan, they made whale fishing legal again, and a lot of these old whale fishers are like, we have our identity back as a culture. And you guys see this as this really awful thing. We see this as going back thousands of years. My great-great-great-grandfather did this, and now I can do it again. And it's important to me. And I look at it, and I'm like, Shamu, don't do it, like. But then, like, I'll eat a fish stick and not even think about it.
Right. Again, I'm willing to be the hypocrite for the time being until I no. When I'm saying yes, I will eat a steak, and then I'll be like, yeah, you shouldn't be hunting animals. I get it. I'm not saying anything other than that hypocrisy is a great form of intellectual freedom here. But I just don't think the argument that, like, we need guns for hunting is that compelling. Because most people who have stockpiles and stockpiles of killing machines are not hunters.
Yeah. And I'm with you. And of course, I align philosophically with you. But it's really hard to, like, when as I get older, I try to, like, listen to everyone, put myself in their position, and there's, like, very extreme ways to think about it. It always makes me think of sports, and I always come back to that because inherently sports doesn't hurt people, like, physically, unless you're Bill Laimbeer. But, like, the best Piston on that team. So before the NBA started, a lot of qualifiers for that.
Thank you for clearing all that up, though.
But it reminds me of, like, tribalism and sports, and, like, how we could just think we believe in something just for the sake of a uniform, or, like, what our parents believed. And, like, I think about, like, this all-decade team debate, and, like, Ben Shapiro coming out and being like, I'm a Celtics fan. And everyone's like, hold up. He just declared his allegiance. And then we jumped on that because we knew how to talk about it. But sometimes, and we know how to talk about what he talks about and all this stuff, but, like, this was a safe wheelhouse for us to drag him, right? Like, Celtics, or maybe, like, pump him up if you're a Celtics fan.
I mean, what were the odds that a guy who grew up in L.A., from my understanding, I haven't really delved that much into Ben Shapiro's
but went to Harvard
background.
He went to college in Boston.
In my mind, it was that he was watching a film and a man wearing a Larry Bird jersey trod on the toes of a local ruffian in a movie that was about the destruction of private property. It was called Do the Right Thing. Now that guy, that's who I want to be.
Well, that was the whole 80s, and, well, I don't know how old he is, but, like, growing up, those sports movies were just like, oh, we found this guy Shaquille O'Neal out of nowhere. I'm talking about Blue Chips, And, like, we don't do that narrative anymore, thankfully. But, like, that was the whole thing, right? Like, oh, man, he's got no choice in life except to be a baller.
But aren't you also the shittiest? If you grew up in L.A., didn't care about basketball, you went to Harvard, and all of a sudden you're a big Celtics fan? Like, you're the grossest.
I'm not claiming he's not the grossest, but also, I love no...
Well, he is the grossest, but
Yes.
We're talking about, like, the guy from L.A. who goes to Boston to go to fucking Harvard, and it is, like, now a Beantown loyalist?
Can I ask you a question? Kind of an aside. I have a friend, maybe a few friends, who grew up in Colorado and moved to L.A. Their allegiance in the NBA goes in this order. The Lakers, the Clippers, and then the Nuggets. But they claim whichever team is best, they're allowed to stand for them. What do you think?
Well, I'll accept that because they've been on cookies and they've shared this wisdom, and I'm going to use that phrase very casually, cavalierly.
Yeah.
Look, I believe in liberated fandom. You can like who you want, but there's something about the Lakers-Celtics thing that is very indicative of who he is, because he's from the place that represented Showtime.
Shapiro, not this
Shapiro,
our friend, right?
Showtime that represented like blackness and magic and sort of the one style of the basketball coin, and then Boston was like the white side of the coin. And he's like, I know I'm from LA, but I'm really more of one of these guys. It's just so. I mean, because wasn't Lakers Celtics about race for the most part?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And like, it wouldn't work if there wasn't a lot of people into the Celtics because they were white. Like, that's fine. If I had a white friend being like, I just really like Kevin McHale and Danny Ainge and they were awesome. Let's forget Dennis Johnson and Robert Parrish and all that stuff. But like, that's fine. That's what makes it lively, right?
Also, though, wasn't he in Boston while they were playing against the Lakers? I don't know exactly his age, but the timeline might add up.
I'm guessing it's the Reggie Lewis era.
I don't know. I'm
He's
just thinking
young.
like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying the Larry Bird era. I'm saying Kobe versus Paul Pierce and the Big Three.
Mm-hmm. I mean, but what the Celtics stand for and the Patriots and the Red Sox is like distinct. Like, let's not pretend like they don't stand for, like the Boston Red Sox, New York Yankees thing is very palpable. You know, it's about race and it's about culture. Yes, I rewind. It's more about culture than race, but race is a contributing factor to these two different cultures. And
right, and the Patriots, the fact that it's Trump's adopted team and Tom Brady and Robert Kraft, and I mean, it's not an accident that they are in Boston.
Yeah, and I wondered, like, I was kind of daydreaming about this, and like, would there ever be a time where like a sports organization like radicalized itself away from a league? Let's say like the Knicks were just like, you know what? We believe you guys all believe in purple. We believe in fuchsia. You know, like
We're relegated. We're not in the NBA. You can come to our arena and there won't be games played.
And I use that as an example because that's kind of what's happening, right? They're just like, oh, you guys are not doing stuff in a virtuous way, but we are. So you guys are chasing these rings, but you're not doing it under a certain ordained thought. We are, right? Is there ever a point where Boston and the Celtics would be like, yeah, we know what we are, and we're going full bore into this. You're with us or you're not?
It's interesting because I don't think Danny Ainge has leaned into the sort of Caucasian-oriented fan base in Boston. I think it just sort of happened with Hayward, that he was a very good player.
Everyone wanted him.
And yeah, he would have gone, any franchise would have happily signed him.
Yeah, he was a good player.
But it was also appropriate that he came back a shell of himself, and there was that idea that Boston really wanted him to be their star, and he was bad, and Brad Stevens was playing him too much.
And who was the villain last year?
But that was also tied into Brad Stevens being his college coach. Like, there were a lot of moving parts, but it ended up being like, we hate Kyrie, but we love Hayward, despite the fact that Hayward is a bad basketball player and Kyrie is the best player on the team.
We always bring that up on Cookies, but I always try to forget that. I'm like, how did Boston Nation scapegoat Kyrie Irving? Like, of course he's like, the flat earth thing was funny, and like he maybe looks surly on paper or in front of us, but like he was kind of a well-liked guy. I think that Marcus Smart was like, he wasn't. We had moments where we were friends and stuff. But the scapegoating of Kyrie Irving, it's just like, it's such a bad look, man. Like, Gordon Hayward was making more money than him, playing much worse than him, and Kyrie Irving is not under team control.
I mean, when Kyrie Irving declared that Hayward was the king of the city, you knew he was out.
Yeah.
Like, there were a lot of indicators, but that one, when he's like, this is your guy right here, about like his bum-ass teammate, I was like, pfft.
But it's like the Knicks and Celtics are the same, right? Like, I think young players from college or free agents are just like, yes, tradition in Boston, all these banners, amazing. New York City, I love Katz's Deli, the gyro at Hudson Yards, let's go. And then half a year into it, they're like, oh no, something's deeply wrong here. I cannot stay. What's
weird about Kemba going there, and did we talk about this? We have talked about it, but I'm not sure we talked about it on the show.
Go on, King. go off, King.
There's never been a good explanation for why Kemba went to play in Boston. There's no reason. And it went completely under the radar, like most of Kemba's career has, despite him being a wonderful basketball player and from New York and having a prominent college career and being a multiple-time All-Star, I'm pretty sure. But no one said, why is Kemba going to Boston? They're not a contender. They're a solid team. There's no way that they're winning a title with the current assemblage of talent. There's not another star in that team.
I believe it was Jackie McMullen that was talking about this on TV, and she was like, "You guys cannot discount the feeling Boston, the arena has. I know it's not the Garden anymore, but she's like the banners, like they just do it really well. So when you walk in, it feels like NBA history in there." And she was like, "Don't discount it. These young men like really want to be a part of this," and that's the only explanation I have for Kemba going there. Also, maybe like not loving his other options. You know, maybe that was just he was so upset at Charlotte for not offering him the max.
My other theory on this is that he really liked his time at UConn. And maybe he has friends or family that are in the northeastern corridor there. Jim Calhoun, his former coach. Maybe this part of it is just he's comfortable there. He's lived in New York. He's lived in the Boston region, and he's lived in North Carolina. So short of coming to the Knicks, which were a garbage option.
Not in the NBA.
They're not even are they a team? Is that even...
It's a collection of basketball fanatics. They just love to practice and play games sometimes.
Short of coming to play for the Westchester Knicks, that was kind of his option, to go to a place with familiarity and a contender. And as you said, a history, and also it's a big market. He's going to be on TV more.
And money. Let's talk about, they offered him a ton of money. And it's funny that Marcus Smart, I guess they spent some time together this week with the World Cup team. And Marcus Smart's quote, Marcus Smart is very entertaining and he's like a good soundbite. But he was just like, yo, Kemba talks a lot. Like, I did not know how much he talked. He is nonstop. He talks so much. He's like, but it's a good thing. And I'm like, oh man, I'm so pulling for Kemba not to be another scapegoat. But he could be. Because as soon as you start losing games because that team isn't good, he's going to get annoying.
I've interviewed Kemba, and he was really, really nice. He was a little cautious, really nice, just over the phone. But everyone who's worked with him seems to really love him.
Yeah, that's his rep. But I don't believe any of these reputations. I don't believe Kyrie Irving is that bitter. I don't believe Kemba is that nice. I think you catch them and you want to frame them however which way you do. I don't think Tim Duncan was that boring. He looks really fun and funny.
Speaking of Tim Duncan, is he on your team of the 2010s?
Not quite, but he deserves to be on there if the criteria is Kobe Bryant. Tim Duncan had his heyday in the aughts. I mean, okay, so to back up, the NBA on their website released, no one, this is the meme, says no one. This is our top 3 all-decade teams. No one cares about this stuff. But they released it, and it's August, and we ate it up because lists are fun. And even though it's an arbitrary thing that we didn't ask for.
Did they indicate how these guys were picked?
No.
Was it just some guy in the office, the social media manager?
Their intern.
All right, cool. Yeah. But there was no sort of methodology
It was Joe Budden. I'm pretty sure it was Joe Budden just ranking it. But lists are great, and we love this stuff. And I know the pushback is just oh, this is so arbitrary, but this is how we make sense of everything. So I'm all for any list at any time. We've been doing this for thousands of years. But the list was funny, and there was some bait in there, and I think Kobe Bryant was the bait.
Was it... the Kobe was listed to the All-NBA third team, and without going through and listing every single guy, it was more or less what you'd expect. It was the big names on the first 2 teams.
Including Carmelo Anthony, who deserves to be there.
And then the third team had LaMarcus Aldridge and Dwayne Wade.
I fell asleep after you said LaMarcus Aldridge. What'd you say?
What were we talking about?
Oh, are we doing a podcast? You said LaMarcus Aldridge, and then I fell asleep. What happened?
It's a little bit like dangling a timepiece in front of you.
Oh, that back to the
LaMarcus
basket.
Aldridge.
Back to the basket post move.
Where am I? Was that a 17-footer? But the Kobe placement on the third team was controversial because...
In both ways.
Because it's Kobe. He's the GOAT. He's the best of all time.
He should be on the second team, if not the first team.
First team is Kobe.
Yeah.
Also, Kobe wasn't good for the 2010s.
It's not his fault. He tore his Achilles tendon, man. So when you look back on this decade, so I'm counting 2010 to 2019. So we're done with this decade. This is the 2020 season.
Yeah, everyone's kind of wheeling out their all-decade lists. So I guess we're saying it's done.
Yeah, this decade is over. Because I think when the finals are played, we just call that the season, the year. But
right, yeah, I agree. And also, just societally, we're saying the decade will be up on January 1st.
So it's done. So Giannis, even
the
though
NBA has to abide by that. We can't be like we're on a different decade schedule than everybody else.
If Giannis averages a triple double with 20 blocks, he's still not on. It's the next decade. You move it forward. But Kobe had 3 good seasons. I believe he won a championship in this decade. Awesome. Kind of on his decline. I stick to it. It sounds like I hate Kobe, but he's a top 20 player. That's incredible. He's up there with like Akeem Olajuwon. Like, this is one of the great players in the history.
Right. He's no Charles Barkley, but he's up there.
Barkley's amazing, though, And so no discredit to him, but he was on the downside of his career. Pau Gasol was kind of the captain of that ship. Lamar Odom was kind of this underrated, wonderful player that did so much for that team.
And
Andrew Bynum.
I was about to say, and Andrew Bynum gave the best
Stats.
years of his life to Kobe Bryant, getting like 7 field goals a game because
team was
Kobe wouldn't
stacked.
let him shoot while being maybe the best center in the NBA.
And a few Derek Fisher lucky bounces, and you have a championship. Amazing. It was on Kobe's watch. We give it to him. And then he tore his Achilles and ends up maybe, and I'm paraphrasing Kellerman here, maybe the most destructive player in recent NBA history memory. Like, his inefficiency was historic after he came back from that. He played 6 games one season, 35, and then played more. And he was one of the worst volume players ever.
Where was Dirk on that list?
Dirk wasn't even there. I mean, you could put him on there. You can put many players. I wanted Draymond Green to be on there. There's a lot of people who claim Klay Thompson should be on that list. I have Dre over Klay, but
Klay Thompson.
let's do it. Let's hear it.
Why would he be on that list?
Let's hear it. Why not?
He's never been better than the 3rd best player on his own team.
Go on.
Other than that 1 year before they started playing Draymond.
Yeah.
He was the 4th best player on their team for the last 3 years.
Could we talk about your eternal hatred for Klay Thompson?
He's a bum. No, he's a good shooter. Every sort of bias that Cookies has uncovered and exposed on this show, except for dribble bias. But we've also uncovered that he benefits from anti-dribble bias.
Yep. Yeah.
Shooting bias.
Yeah.
Chips bias. Scoring bias. Anti-dribble bias. Defensively, crouch bias.
Which is, except for dribble bias, all of the biases Kobe has. That's why he's on this list.
I love when people talk about Klay like, well, yeah, but defensive metrics don't like him because he doesn't get any blocks or steals or deflections. I'm like, so you're saying we're all acknowledging that he doesn't get any blocks, he doesn't get steals, he doesn't get any deflections. The Golden State defense is better with him on the bench. Other than that, though, he's sick.
Well, I kind of fall into that area, as we know. But
Crouch bias personified.
I love Klay Thompson because...
Are you on a stool or are you crouching behind that table?
You guys can't see it, but I'm like slapping the hardwood.
Looks
man.
like he's riding a small horse.
Yeah. Pause. But like, I think I love players like Klay Thompson because I think Draymond is I'd rather have Draymond on my team than Klay Thompson.
I would too because he's a lot better.
Yeah, but I love players like Klay Thompson because all the smart people who have come up with the metrics that describe, to your point, how maybe he's not good, have been like, our metrics are bad. Now we have to readjust. But I love nerds who kind of constantly readjust. So that's my own bias. Like, I don't like equations that last longer than 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Like, For example, Draymond Green's PER is not good. His BPM is fantastic this decade. That makes PER suspect to me because Draymond Green was amazing this decade. We're always trying to find weaknesses in these metrics.
Yes. Also, all these lists generally have a kind of recency bias, as they tend to when we...
It's just a reflection of what we want. We are biased when we make these metrics.
Right, and Kobe, we love Kobe as a basketball community, and he's always celebrated. But to have him over guys who actually had their entire career over the last decade, to me, those are the guys...
Like Lillard's should be on there
Lillard,
over
but
Kobe.
what about like Paul Pierce? He was a rookie in '98, so his entire career, for the most part, was over that decade.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, like these are not guys I would say would be on those teams, but like Sean Marion was a rookie in '99. Like that's perfect. He was really good as a rookie, and he had his entire career.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I'm talking about 2010. I misspoke.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the. Okay, so we want guys who were rookies in 2009. Okay,
09,
so
yes.
I take Dirk back. Dirk's trash.
Oh no, but there was discussions about if we're going to value championships.
Dirk was a bum for the last 10 years,
But it got,
and widely disliked.
I heard from one person. But like, Kobe is. I mean, we talked about like ideas that we don't love that are just grandfathered into our conscience for inexplicable reasons, and that's Kobe Bryant. And I think we're towards the end of that. But he's like, we've always had guns. Why can't I have a gun now? It's like, well, Kobe's always on this list, so we have to put him on. But we don't because there's better players than him.
Right. For example here, I'm not a fan of DeMar DeRozan.
But he deserves to be on there. Yeah.
Like,
if we're not going to value
he had a
defense, he's
better
on.
decade than Kobe.
The interns put together a top 50 list, and it looks better than this. I mean, DeMar DeRozan ranked much higher than Kobe on that list.
Monte Ellis,
the god, number 18 all time. Les Gruel for the interns. A job well done.
I mean, John Wall was a lot better than Kobe. There's
Bradley
a bunch
Beal.
of dudes. Bradley Beal's better than Kobe for his last decade.
Totally. And this list doesn't value defense, so you have like Dwight Howard should be on that list.
Like DeMarcus Cousins was a lot better than Kobe. That's not even close.
I love it. It's such bait because you leave Kobe off and it's a funnier joke, but you put Kobe on and then you get traffic. And Kellerman, I think, makes all the sense in the world. He was on First Take yesterday just being like, Kobe was maybe one of the most destructive players in recent history. And it got to me thinking about how Carmelo Anthony still doesn't have a job. And we've talked about this endlessly, right? But like, I think Kobe...
Like Kobe was on it, but not Kyrie. Like come on, it's as you said, it was trolling.
Yeah, it was trolling. I mean, Kevin Love.
Respect.
Yeah. Respect. Yes, that's what we're doing, right? Because we're just talking endlessly, and the NBA exists without us, and we think we have influence over this, but like none of this matters, right? No matter what we vote on. But also a detail with this is like LaMarcus Aldridge is on the list, and people are like, well, he's a perennial all-star, and it's like, I thought we didn't care about that. So therefore, we have to care about it. So when people are like, who cares about these all-NBA teams? I'm like, this is the parameters in which like we frame these players. So a fan vote can affect in the future how we perceive it because a couple coaches putting LaMarcus Aldridge on this list constantly, on the all-star list constantly, makes us be like, okay, he's top all decade. I'm like, no, it's an arbitrary stat.
Oh, 100%. And this reminds me of, I forget who the original anecdote was, but I think it was something that someone like Conan O'Brien had said, and it was something that was told to him. So I'm going to follow this game of telephone with paraphrasing the original intent, which was that the guy mentioned the biggest Hollywood star from like the 1940s. And he was like, have you heard of this person? And he's like, no, I have no idea who that is. And he's like, this was like the biggest actor on the planet.
Yeah.
He was so important. He was a god. No one knows who he is. No one remembers him. I don't even know his name. I'd never even heard of the guy before. Some of the biggest musical groups from like the 70s. you have no idea who they are. You don't know their records.
It's happening to Michael Jordan right now, where the younger, like Zoomers, are just like the meme guy, and I'm like, oh, we don't care that he's not the best of all time anymore. 'cause
Michael
we're
Jordan,
aging
the
out of
guy we
that.
know for losing all the time.
Yeah, for being a quitter, the GOAT quitter of all time. But yeah, I mean that's less controversial than Kobe now because it's just aging out into a different generation.
I've mentioned this before, but I remember being at an event and sitting next to Shaq West, and we were talking hoops, and he's, rapper, had some big hits, and he loves
Mamba.
basketball.
Yeah.
Loves basketball. And we're talking, and I think he was probably 19 at the time. And this was a couple of years ago, and he's like, yeah, well, I'm too young to remember Kobe, but he's still my favorite. And I was like, wait, you're too young to remember Kobe? And he was kind of talking about this decade that we're specifically referencing. He's like, yeah, I've watched him play, but he was washed at that point. And you're like, oh, that's right. People who are discussing basketball as adults didn't really see prime Kobe, let alone prime Shaq or prime AI or prime McGrady. And you start going back. And granted, we are old as dirt. But it is amazing how fast that turnover happens.
It's like,
where someone will say, like, Kobe's, greatest man. He's the best of all time. I didn't really see him, though.
man, Joe Budden must have had so many number one hits, just dominating the charts, right? He's number 3 rapper of all time. It's like, no, he didn't have any number one hits, solo number one hits.
Why will people always be trolled by a list?
They're so fun because, like, there's no. So when I think of Kobe as like a top 20 to 30 player, because there's no real difference between 20 and 30.
But I'm talking about all these lists, right?
No. Well, so I'm getting at that.
Okay.
Because the way you order them is. It's all those biases that you mentioned. It's like it's a reflection of what point we want to like reflect upon ourselves, and like we only care about a couple of these things. So like at the year end, I used to have to make top 10 lists for the newspaper every year for albums, and I'm like, after number 1, does it matter?
This was for Newsday?
Yeah, for the Brooklyn Rail.
Oh, the Eagle.
Yeah, but yeah, after number 1, it just didn't matter, and like. Ironically, Lisztomania was like my favorite album for that year. It was so good.
It's a really good album.
Yeah, man, it still sounds great.
Oh, I saw Phoenix during my first trip to Mexico City.
Really?
Yeah.
That sounds like their element. I feel like they do better internationally than they do in America.
I mean, this was like 10 years ago.
That album was great, man.
Great album. Huge album.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Lisztomania that's going on right now because some blog or something like Beer O'Clock or whatever it was called. It was like it
Top
had
50 rappers ever.
It had like 800 followers and there was no gravitas to them. It was just some dudes who put together a list and put it up, and it went viral. And it was like the top 50, and it got people enraged and forced like Joe Budden and Ebro and every gatekeeper or torch bearer of the New York scene to come up with their own list that put KRS-One at the at the mandatory top 7 position.
Where's Rakim on this list?
I don't see Guru 1.
Yeah. Well, it's like they're arguing right now about like the Sean Price mural, right, in Crown Heights, and it went up after he died. Rest in peace. And I think someone started painting over it, and the community was like, "Whoa, who sanctioned this? Like, no one talked about this." And everyone blamed the restaurant across the street or the store across the street, and they're like, "That's not my building. I have nothing to do with this." And it got me thinking, like, how
Name 3 songs off of Nocturnal.
yeah, I was like, how would you tell a Zoomer who Sean Price was? Like a pivotal member of Helter Skelter, which was a part of a bigger collective called the Boot Camp Clique.
Go on. Well, right. They were best known for. They had a very murky sound produced by Evil D and the Beat Miners.
Yeah.
You know, who did the Party at 205, like 99, 2000?
And how I would describe it to a Zoomer would be like he was a really beloved person in his community, sort of like Nipsey Hussle. Like 10 years from now, I was like, who was Nipsey? I was like, a really beloved guy in his community. And like, legit, give him a mural. That's fine.
Man, everybody gets forgotten.
Yeah.
For anyone who's out there thinking that they're an underachiever, everyone gets forgotten, man.
Yeah. I mean, I love Hall of Fame debates till the end because like that's what we're doing. So every year, let's debate it. You know, and the Basketball Hall of Fame is kind of like the worst Hall of Fame because it it awards your whole life. So if, like Carmelo will get in because they'll talk about Syracuse, and I think he belongs there anyway. But the parameters are
And
really
international for Melo is a big deal. He's got
Huge.
a couple golds and a silver, but
Yeah.
the Q's championship, and then making whatever 9 All-Star teams or something.
We love these lists, and like if we are down on them, and a lot of the talk back on Twitter is just like, why do we do this? This is so arbitrary. This doesn't matter. We didn't ask for this. I'm like, yeah, we didn't ask for pizza either. And you might not like pizza, but like usually like people get into it and have thoughts about it.
I'm more familiar with like the rap context of these like top 5, top 10
love it.
lists, and it's such a big part of rap. I don't know if rockism has that same attachment to like the top 10, and it happens all the time, like that phrase, like top 10 dead or alive, and like who's the king of NYC, who's like the number one rapper.
It used to, but then rock has become irrelevant, right? Like when rap started, so you just age out of it. Like none of these,
Right, it's like Stones versus Beatles,
yeah, it used to be huge.
MJ versus Prince.
Yeah, but we got older and stopped caring, and like watch like usually these rap lists used to have like Tupac and Biggie jockeying for 1 and 2, but we're aging out of that. And like Jay-Z has managed to stick around. Well, he's alive, but he's managed to remain in our.
Is a key advantage being on the planet.
Also a disadvantage because he's made a lot of bad records. So Kobe, right? Jay-Z popped his Achilles and made so many bad records.
But to Jay-Z's credit, some of them like were hits. So it introduced him as an artist.
But those are all-star teams because those aren't actual like. So what are we talking about? Like the best or the most popular? Because when DT became president, everyone's just like, we're gonna get some.
Well,
great
I'm
artwork.
saying he did not disappear in the way that guys like Ice Cube or KRS-One or Rakim did, or even some of the bigger stars from his own era who passed away, because he was able to introduce himself to younger generations. I'm not saying his catalog got that much stronger in terms of his average. Like his efficiency dropped.
Oh yeah.
But people got to see him play.
Yeah. It's just like memory. It's like the last thing you see.
I mean, every 15-year-old or at least 20-year-old knows like the song about New York with him and Alicia Keys.
Oh yeah, huge.
The Concrete Jungle, Where Dreams Are Made Of.
Yep.
But I mean, that was like, oh, I know Jay-Z. He's a rap star.
But then how do you reconcile that with like, and the thought I was going for is like, remember when DT became president and everyone was just like, we're going to get some substantial artworks in this lifetime, like Nirvana, grunge, like really poignant stuff we'll remember forever. Old Town Road, most dominating track of the last 2 years. Amazing. Great. I love it. So like, do you hold that up to like the Alicia Keys Jay-Z song, which is kind of like emotional and kind of like a gimme there. And Old Town Road had a different kind of vibe. It's like a children's song.
Yeah, I don't think any particular tone has a monopoly on contemporary pop music.
Or maybe my question was, is this list built critically or statistically?
Well, the rap list, and it was funny to see the old guys put together the exact same list for the most part that we did also when we were like listening to, you know, records and buying vinyl and arguing about rap, which was like Rakim's number one.
Jay-Z was the best for 10 years. He was unbelievable for 10 years.
It was like the same guys you
Immaculate.
mentioned. It was always Biggie, Pac, KRS. Big Daddy Kane seems to have really dropped over time because he didn't stick around enough. Slick Rick, people would have up there. This is like that generation. Mm-hmm. Then Jay-Z came in and Nas, and then they restructured it. It's kind of like if you're really young, right, and you weren't able to, like, say, go to the club a long time ago, you wouldn't have seen how, like, the old school set shifted. So years ago, the old school set was Top Billin', Wrath of Cain, like Children's Story. There was a couple other ones. They're all like, they were old
LL
school
Cool J.
records. LL Cool J, but they were old school records.
Right.
Then it shifted into being Campolo, Lucchini, Tribe Called Quest.
Jungle Brothers.
Jungle Brothers was still actually a little too old school. This was more
Yeah.
like Black Rob Woe.
Right,
It became like a 97 mix.
Right.
And then now it's like, is it going to move on to like Rick Ross hustling? It's like, does it? I feel like that's how the gradation will always go. It's just going to be 15 years prior is like the old school set.
Have you run into this issue? Like a lot of my friends who maybe are around rap music but aren't like obsessed with it, sort of like every fan of everything, are just like, oh, I just don't like trap. And I was like, you have to clear that up for me because like that's a very specific thing. I love trap. I think it was like one of the greatest things ever. But they'll hear like a song that came out this summer and be like, oh, trap. I'm like, that's not trap music. I don't know. Are you talking about the drum sound? And like, that's an interesting thing because
Like that you can sort of feel like it had sonic origins in the South.
Yeah,
And you're just like, ugh, so trap.
yeah. And they just use that to dismiss a whole thing in the same way, like, it's like, I just don't like punk. And I'm like, well, what do you think is punk? Do you think it's like screaming with loud drums and distorted guitars? Or is it like the ethos of it? Like, I don't know where you're coming from.
But we get these sort of cultural dividers where trap, I don't like trap, no playing trap. Not that different from disco sucks.
It upsets me, and I have to like take a deep breath because I'm just like, I thought we took care of this years ago, but we're still there. Just being like, I don't like trap. I'm like, this is Lil Nas X, man.
Like disco sucks was homophobic and racist and anti-coastal and all these other things that were
Those three things, for sure. AIDS. It was anti-AIDS.
it was all those things. And saying you don't like trap isn't the same, but it has the same spirit. It's
Yeah.
saying I don't like this because it's from somewhere else. It sounds different from what I listen to. It's ageist. There's also there's some naughty little issues in there with trap where
Yeah.
it's like there's something like they're ignorant, the ones who make this. It's stupid. I don't like it.
Yeah, or the NBA, like, we need to, like, reinstill values into the NBA, whatever.
It's definitely value based.
Dress code,
I
yeah.
agree.
And, yeah, but I can almost commiserate with my friends who say that because, first of all, they don't like rap music, so they don't care. And also, like, they just need to put it into a compartment because they're like, okay, if it's not trap, what is it? And I'm like, well, that's a complicated answer. That's a complicated question. And that's what these lists are, right? Like, just tell me who the best is, and then we can move on from there. It's like, well, all these lists are nuanced and wrong, but that's the whole nature of these lists. That's why we love stats,
At
right?
the same time, once you outgrow a genre, and I use outgrow in really a chronological sense, you're not necessarily supposed to like it or get it.
No, our job is to not like it.
Yeah, and when you see older people grousing about the state of the NBA on, say, Players Only, RIP, it is a completely natural thing, and it's worth roasting, but it's the most obvious sort of cross-cultural tradition.
Yeah.
Going back to like, you call that a drawing of a wildebeest on this cave wall? In my day,
Yeah.
we used one dimension.
Yeah. I mean, the most interesting version of that phenomenon to me where it like works from the top down, like, for example, Billie Eilish is like a new like singer, musician, made probably my favorite record this year. She put out an EP and it was kind of just like, critics didn't like it. The gatekeepers were just like, it's a thing, but we don't love it. Massive, massive following online, sells out shows, people online waiting to get in to see her. And their whole vibe is like, oh, we don't care about you anymore. You could say this is not good, but like, okay, just stay on your side. We're just going to enjoy this forever. And that's like an interesting development with like the devaluation of criticality and like empiricism, right? Because empirically, Billie Eilish gets paid more attention to than most other critically acclaimed artists. And we may think she's not the best, but she has the numbers to prove it. And that's what we argue about on Cookies all the time, being like, well, statistically, Klay Thompson isn't as good, therefore he's not as good. And I'm like, when does that get mushy? Like, when do we stop eating meat here?
Also, there's sort of a absence of gatekeepers to some degree, or the gatekeepers have changed. And it's interesting when you'll
There's
see
more of them.
like Robert Christgau on Twitter, like not that many followers, his voice doesn't really matter. But there was a point where you read and respond and react and care about what he wrote. He's a legendary critic. He made some missteps, like his adoration of Northern State. But it's weird to see someone like him just be kind of another voice on Twitter, where I read his reviews all the time.
Yeah, and I think, like, shout out to my other favorite podcast within ours, Corporate Lunch, GQ, because they talk about brands and how important branding is to now. And I think Gen Xers and boomers and maybe some young millennials might be like, brands are gross, it's corporate, we don't like that. It's totally the opposite now. Like, you are your brand. So therefore, like, you stop rooting for like pieces in a collection and you root for Supreme or the Venoments or whatever. So we start rooting for like newspapers instead of like the critics in them. And maybe we've always done that, but like, is there a way?
I mostly just empathize with the editorial voice of Hamburger Helper on Twitter.
Yeah.
That's my spirit helper.
Yeah. I mean, isn't this all decade list just a brand? This is a brand, right? So we're just discussing a larger idea. We accept this idea of an all NBA decade team, but we should not? I don't know, you know?
Well,
what are we
it's
questioning?
fictional. It's not real.
Oh, same with Supreme, right? Like, Supreme doesn't exist without these pieces. Only the things are real.
Well, just to delve back into Sapiens once again,
Yeah.
they attribute a lot of society's growth from being hunter-gatherers and being able to be organized as larger and larger and larger groups of people, is that we're able to translate ideas and not things that are just physical. So like an LLC. Like, oh, it's a company. It exists even if there's no employers or employees.
Yeah.
Even if there's no product, it still exists. And that's exactly what a brand is.
Yeah. And
You don't even have to be able to buy it. You don't even have to be able to do anything with it.
Yeah.
You can be loyal to Supreme and love Supreme and never wear it, and they could not even have an office.
yeah, that's me. I love Supreme, but I don't own anything. And yeah, to finish that thought, it's like, and also to your point, these brands exist and ideas on the internet exist, and I think we're post the idea of actuality. So like, when people like get offline and like go outside, I'm like, yeah, but my screensaver's a sunset, or it's sunny, it's a beach, it's the same thing. And sometimes I feel like if you listen to wellness people now in 2019, they're just like, screen time is important, you have to get off of it. As soon as researchers, Zoomers, age into researching, the first thing they're going to do is debunk that, being like, screen time is fine, we're living longer and healthier lives. It had nothing to do with video games, heavy metal music, or screen time.
But you're growing horns out of the back of your head because your neck has been hunched down to look at the intern's handiwork on twitter.com.
What happened to the outrage with heavy metal music? Did it die? The Tipper Gore thing. We thought that was going to be the downfall of civilization. Not to name check that documentary.
I don't want to the same point though. It's like, I don't want to return to the horrible conversation about gun control and mass murder here.
Bummer.
But video games have always been a target for cultural criticism. And like, I'm not like the boomer here that's like, it is. I also am a bit like, if you're spending all day learning how to like strafe fire and jump behind things and shoot, and then you go shoot a thing up, I'm like, it's kind of what you were doing in the game. Like, I'm not saying it makes you do it, but I think if you're inclined to behave in a certain way, that if you were playing that game and customizing yourself to these kinds of weapons and these kinds of scenarios, that is a likely output for that sort of aggression or violent outburst.
Well, let's reframe it to more like lighthearted way, because that is dark. And
Yeah, I didn't
right.
want to go back to that. It was
Yeah.
more sort of what you were talking about with heavy metal.
let's say the idea
leading to Satanism and human sacrifice
Right.
and sex and
the
blood
fall of
and whatever.
civilization. Can we talk about that in terms of the idea of defense in basketball? Like you could like be like, I'm gonna go into a game. I'm Carmelo Anthony. I'm gonna ratchet up my defense. I'm gonna crouch lower than I've ever crouched before. I'm gonna lock my guy down, and you just don't do it. Like, what is the intent? What is the simulation, and what is the actuality?
I remember interviewing Melo, and it was prior to the playoffs in OKC, his lone season there. And he was like,
Legend.
we're going to go out there, and he's like, no team in the NBA is going to be able to beat us 4 times in 7 games. And it's the kind of bravado you expect from the athlete, especially going to the playoffs. But it's like, whoa, that's not true. And they came out and got knocked silly. But it's that same concept. I'm going to go out there, I'm going to shut my guy down, I'm going to make all my shots. Oh, I can't.
Yeah, I'm on the side that you can intend to play defense, but it doesn't happen. So I think there is a divide there. That could change if we have more data. If they were actually good, I'd think differently. But so far, what we've seen with all these dark things and lighthearted things is like what you really want to do doesn't, like the Kobe Mamba mentality. It's just like, Jordan Clarkson, you're the man now. You have to defeat your demons. You have to look in the mirror. He's going to play in China now. He's not in the league anymore. Jason Tatum, all these players that Kobe has like mentored. I'm just like, oh, you're walking them through an actualization that's your memory, but they don't have these skill sets and they don't have this mindset either.
Well, if Trae Young starts shooting a ton of
Mid-range jumper.
turnaround mid-range jumpers, his game will deteriorate.
There is no upside to him shooting mid-range jumpers, and I want, we've always been trying to figure this out. I want mid-range jumpers to have value again, but not in Trae Young. That's not going to happen for him.
The good thing is he won't be shooting them.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the coach in Atlanta, Lloyd Pierce, they have a real system, and they avoid mid-range jumpers.
Yeah. Which is interesting, right? Because Popovich is coaching the World Cup team this week, and he has a bunch of ball stoppers on the Spurs. But he's been pushing a 0.5 second thing where, like, you have to make a decision in 0.5 seconds. You can't hold the ball for longer than that. So dribble, pass, shoot. It has to be one of those. So he's really pushing pace. But with his personnel and the value system of the marketplace, he's accumulated a lot of plotting mid-range assassins.
You're saying his approach to USA basketball is different from his approach on the Spurs.
Yes.
But that makes sense because if you're playing for USA basketball, when you have far more talent than other teams, at least if you're going from that perspective, you want more possessions in the game.
Yeah, always. And
if you're playing on a team like the Spurs, you want to be methodical.
Because you don't have the talent.
Or you're trying to do something different. You're not trying to just overwhelm people with speed and strength and just run people off the court. You actually have to take your time to do things in a certain way.
And like it's that cliche, I love styles make fights, and the NBA is a different animal than the World League, And also his team is really young, and they have a different style than the Spurs do. I have a question for you regarding Melo. Do you think if Melo re-upped with the Knicks for a long-term contract and it ran out this year when he's a free agent, do you think they'd re-up him again? Sort of like people tolerate Kobe Bryant for being so bad because he's been with the team for so long?
I feel like his relationship with the front office had been like fractious for a while. Mm-hmm. He also wouldn't have allowed them to trade Porzingis, I don't think. I don't know how Melo coexists in a team that did not have aspirations to win, even if his presence didn't have much to do with that goal either way.
I mean, Kobe had no aspirations to win when he played those last few years.
None.
Yeah. He just wanted buckets.
I'm not sure Melo can help anyone right now, but I do sort of agree that the Knicks were awful anyway. They did nothing without him. Having Melo here for the last couple of years would have been kind of nice. Oh,
totally. Him and Lynn, it would have been great. But I think so. I posted this on Twitter. Like one of my buddies, who actually coined the phrase "rockism" that you just dropped in the newspaper, but not the Brooklyn Rail, sent me an article that was talking about a famous pastor, like a hipster pastor, and his involvement with the Knicks team of that era. Like, I didn't know Justin Bieber got baptized in Tyson Chandler's bathroom.
I did not know that either.
It was wild. And I didn't, like, so this pastor would have like,
Some Hillsong shit.
yes, exactly. It was the Hillsong community, and he'd walk into the garden like royalty. So all the coaches and players would kind of gravitate towards him for conversation.
I was at a Knicks game this year and saw Hillsong people come in, and they had like 5 front row seats all next to each other.
Dude, it's a house of worship. They're not in the NBA. It's not a house of entertainment. And I have no problems with that. I mean, I think you can be all those things and still be a smart franchise, but they're operating under the principle of like, I think they look at the Warriors dynasty and being like, sure, they won, but at what cost? Spiritually.
True. But the question is Hillsong actually buying 5 front row seats? Or are the
No,
Knicks
they're getting
saying,
comped.
that's what I mean. The Knicks
Yeah.
are like, no, we got you because you are a church.
And it's a business because if you do your next event here, like we're going to make money over and over. And like, that's not even corruption. That's just like,
Do
this is
they
our
do
house.
events there?
I believe so.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I don't know at all.
Yeah.
But what you were talking about Golden State, at what cost? So the cost is $100 million over 4 years.
For Dre Dog. I love him. I love him.
It's a
bargain. It's a
It's a
bargain.
great deal for Golden State. It also might not be a bad deal for him because he's a very specific player.
Totally. And I think this is one that like the NBA Twitter community just like nailed right off the bat. They're just like, oh, he could have gotten more money elsewhere, but he fits perfectly here and he becomes a different player on like Chicago or New York. He belongs here. And we just like all got that right. It's so amazing how some things just click.
I'm wondering what he would have gotten as a free agent, just hypothetically, because there aren't a lot of teams after this season with the kind of cap space that would allow you to make a monstrous offer to get Draymond Green on your team. He's also someone who has shown that he's a lot better when he's motivated, that he doesn't feel the pressure to be fantastic during the regular season. He like turns it up, and then he becomes a dominant defensive wizard, basketball genius that we know and love in the playoffs. So he's not really a good fit for like a rebuilding team. You can't put him on a team that doesn't have a lot of shooting because he can't really shoot. He has to be with like a real weird mix of shooters, a guard who can really handle the ball but is not necessarily ball dominant. There's a lot of criteria to getting the value out of Draymond Green that you need to if you're going to pay him $30-some million a year, 35. Golden State gets a bargain because they know exactly how to extract $35 million worth of value out of him, but they're only paying him 2/3 of that.
Yeah, it's great. And I love that that model in the NBA because I can relate to so much of it as a human. Like, I'm not good at so many things. I don't belong so many places. But given the right circumstances, I'll be like more myself and like less timid and like less shy if you surround me with the things that work for me. And like, I look at situations like that in the NBA. I'm waiting for someone to pick up Nerlens Noel and like use him correctly. Or like Linsanity, whatever. They got the most out of him. Whatever the Knicks are going to do, like these young guys playing, like that's what they need. They're going to get run. But like with Draymond Green, it's the most successful version of that, where like he is in that situation. Sometimes there was moments in the playoffs last year, I'm like, is this guy a first-team All-NBA player? Like he's running this defense and helping them on offense.
I don't think it's too hyperbolic to suggest that Draymond Green is clearly the best defensive player of this generation. whether that goes back to Ben Wallace or Dennis
Dwight Howard.
Rodman or Dwight Howard. But, going back, the game shifts, right? And someone like Ben Wallace
Kawhi
is
Leonard.
interesting
Yeah.
because Ben Wallace was an absolute superstar in a way that we almost can't fathom now because the game is so different.
So different, right? He's a
Everyone.
different player now.
That whole era, everyone was inefficient. You look
Yeah.
at the leading scorers in the league, they all had true shooting percentages of like 50%, 52. The guys today are 60%. It was just a different era. That doesn't mean that those guys wouldn't have been able to thrive and be efficient now or vice versa. But at that point, having a guy who is a complete offensive liability didn't matter because there wasn't that much of a gulf between him and like the guys who were scoring a lot. And having a defensive monster in an era when defense reigned supreme was enormous. And now you look back and you're like, I don't even know what Ben Wallace would be doing right now. Like, what would he? How would that even work? Like, there's not even a good comparison to him particularly.
It's not Keith Van Horn.
Maybe it's KVH. But anyway, to that point, Draymond is an absolute superstar in this era in a way that he might not have been in the 80s either.
And I'm glad you used the word superstar because you're right. The game has changed away from the Ben Wallaces and the Dennis Rodmans. But Draymond is also like one of a kind. Like there's not many players like him that exist now. So it's like, oh, we got our Draymond Green in Amari Spellman. We drafted him. I'm like, no, you didn't. And it's so interesting that the Warriors traded for Amari Spellman. But like, he is an outlier in the same way Curry is an outlier. And the Warriors will always be interesting to me because they have those two players.
Well, they took a leap because of Draymond. Like, Clay, he's fine.
He's on the team.
Curry's spectacular.
Yeah.
But Curry and Clay together weren't enough to be a title-winning team. They were enough to be good. They were exciting. They could score, they could get points up. They were great shooters, two of the best we've seen. But when you added Dre, that was the third heat.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, actually, this guy deforms the entire court. The craziest stat about Dre and why I have always loved him, not only for the way he plays and the insane shit that he does and just everything.
He's the best.
Love him. But there was one stat I saw, and this may have changed. It was a couple years ago. But there was a stat on when NBA.com started releasing opponent field goal percentage and specifically about rim protection. And Draymond Green I think he was the best rim protector in the NBA, or it was like the best post defender. And not only was he the best in like the 95th percentile at defending against people in the post, he was targeted more than any other player. And you're like, that is the most secret, awesome weapon that you go on a center and every team in the NBA is like, feed the center, Dre's on him. And then they just get shut down. And then it comes back the other direction and Dre is on the perimeter and your center's sitting there in quicksand. He was the ultimate weapon.
Ultimate. And throughout that entire Ultimate run, his PR was terrible. Like, it was below league average. And that made me think, like, PR is a bad stat because Draymond Green is the best player on this court.
But just that idea that Golden State's perceived weakness was that you could attack Draymond Green in the post.
Oh, it was a bait. Yeah, it's bait.
Led to the worst possible possessions of attacking anybody in the post. It was one of the coolest things I think I've ever seen, like, crystallized.
Yeah, it's a height bias or whatever. And he's one of the unique players. Like, Larry Johnson was kind of like him on the Knicks. Like, when he got zapped of his leaping ability and his back gave out, he would just guard fives. And in that era, that was wild because he would guard Alonzo Mourning. He would give up, 8 inches on him or something. But he was a very good defender.
I think we'll be able to find some guys who may not be able to replicate the offensive skill set as him, but someone like PJ Tucker gives you a little of that Draymond thing, where you can take a guy who's like 6'6", 6'5", and put him on a guy that's 6'9" and get away with it. And I think that's exactly what Morey was looking to do when puts him at center.
Yeah, he's
and
really cheap.
Then just puts him on the sideline or has him run the floor, and I think those parts are easier to replicate. A smaller guy with long arms who can defend guys in the post. But it's the fact that Dre is a basketball genius that really cements everything together.
Yeah, and as soon as we see it in actuality, we look for more players like that. And, like, he's going to be a Knicks legend, but I thought Jordan Bell had moments like that in college.
He didn't get that max contract.
Oh, it's a long game, Ben. Just wait a few more years, and he's going to get paid max with a player option and a trade kicker. But when he played in college, I was like, oh, before he was drafted by the Warriors, I was like, he's playing like Draymond Green. Like, he's just orchestrated the entire complexion of a defensive hold, you know? And then he had such great, like, not secondary, like, weak side instincts, but, like, he had skills on his own to correct for mistakes.
There are many clips of Draymond Green just single-handedly wrecking havoc
Incredible.
on offenses.
Yeah,
And,
I like him.
you know, I don't know if this falls under any either eye test or it falls under metric test. But I think where they come together is you want guys defensively who cause chaos without compromising your defense.
Marcus Smart.
Marcus Smart, that's why I'm a big Nerlens fan. Nerlens causes havoc.
Deflections is a great stat.
You know, Paul George, Covington, Kawhi, guys who just get in the way. And there's times when basketball is kind of an easy sport, you know? And if you're playing on a team and you're getting rocked, it feels like there's nothing you can do. They're making shots, you're trying to defend them, they're getting easy buckets. There's nothing you can do. And when you're scoring well, you know, like, oh, we're just moving the ball. Easy game. Find the open man. You know, get a dribble, kick the ball out, get a shot. And basketball can feel very simple. But when you have those guys on a defensive team, it's never simple. You can't do shit against teams that have guys that just disrupt your offense all the time. It's the most frustrating thing in the world because it's not normal.
That's why I have the Sixers as my favorite as champions, because I think they have two guys like that, not including Simmons, who's also kind of like that. Tybal and Zaire Smith are that player. They're just like fucking annoying to play against. You know, Zaire has a ceiling of a elite defender, and Tybal is just annoying. He's at least, his ceiling is Marcus Smart, who we love, you know, who will never make an all-star team, but you don't want to play against him.
With that team, without getting into a Sixers thing, it's like Embiid. He's just disruptive. You have a shot at the rim that you normally are able to get, and there's this 7'1" guy there who's like in front of you, and you have to end up kicking it back out.
Tobias Harris better score a ton of buckets this season because, like, he just needs to be efficient and average 27. He doesn't do much else other than that. Scoring is important.
In retrospect, and people have been talking about this since the day the trade happened, and you know, maybe even more so now after he signed to a max deal, which I think we all assumed was going to happen, but now it did.
Yep.
Is that, you know, Philly gave up quite a bit for Tobias Harris and made a lot of financial commitment to him when Otto Porter is better than he is, most likely.
Oh, yeah, that's been going around a bit.
And Otto Porter, they got for nothing. Otto Porter was free.
I like that. Yeah, I mean, but teams always make this error, you know, like, yeah, they should have taken Otto Porter.
Take Otto Porter for nothing, and then keep your 2 first-round draft picks and keep Waluigi, and then package all those things for a superstar next year or something. Anyhow, I'm with you. Tobias Harris needs to pick up Redick's scoring, not be a liability defensively, and he actually kind of has to be able to dribble a little bit.
Yo, he's got to be an amazing offensive player because he doesn't do anything else, and all these guys do other things, but he just needs to score a bunch.
He's kind of Ersan Ilyasova with some ISO game.
He's better. I mean, I'm a
Definitely
Tobias
better.
fan.
Definitely better. But I just mean, that's the role. He's a stretch 4.
Volume.
Who gives
Get
you some
buckets.
decent defense.
Yeah.
He can rebound a bit, but he gives you a little bit of action on the bounce. He can dribble up. He can go ISO, but he ends up with a lot of mid-range jumpers out of those.
Yeah, it's annoying. He has to get hot to be good. He's not necessarily like playing within the construct of like the game. He doesn't get to the line that much anymore, right?
Not that much. A lot of people, I think Nate Silver, projecting the Sixers to have more wins than anybody. I think that's a reasonable suggestion. They have a ton of talent in the starting lineup. They have 5 guys who are very good.
I love that starting lineup.
and it doesn't make a ton of sense positionally, but there's also the school of thought when you take your best players and you put them on the court and you figure it out.
Yeah.
And Horford, Embiid, Simmons,
Trey Burke, just kidding.
Josh Richardson, and Tobias are like 5 very, very good basketball players that are all going to be on the court together. And you're like, you should be able to figure that out.
Yeah, it's all there. And even though they kink shame themselves, they got 2 guards, Neto and Burke, which is a shame. But I just love Zaire Smith and Tybal. I can't wait to see them play.
I'm all in on Zaire.
I think he's gonna be a star, man.
There's a reasonable chance.
Yeah.
I don't know that
In
the ceiling is.
right.
You know, we can say, oh, he could be a Kawhi Leonard. Like,
no.
I'm not saying he'll be a star on a superstar level, but like,
Covington or
could
something.
he be an Iguodala maybe?
Yeah.
No, I'm just
Iguodala was great too.
No, that would be like to me the ceiling. Like
Yeah.
a versatile wing defender who can dribble a bit, make some good passes. And Iguodala was more than that. Iguodala was an all-star Olympian, but could he fill that role that Iguodala filled on Golden State?
Or Bruce Bowen in that great run. I consider Bruce Bowen a star in that run. That's what I mean.
Oh, value-wise or contribution, but he couldn't handle the ball at all.
And I don't know if Zaire can either.
I don't either.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying like all-star, superstar, max contract guy, but like in the way Mitchell Robinson is kind of a star.
When you have as much talent and as much invested in a postseason run as the Sixers currently do, I think you just sort of say, screw the regular season. And
Just get there.
And you say, okay, we're going to give Zaire backup point guard minutes. We're just going to see what works. We're going to give him opportunities. We're going to try all these little small ball lineups with Simmons at the 5.
I want Embiid to be managed. I want Embiid to sit.
Same. Yeah. You know, you've got Horford and Embiid. Whenever you need to win a game, you can have a fantastic defensive center who can also shoot, who can also score in the paint. You can have that guy on the court. But I also want to see bonkers, berserk lineups with Simmons at the 5, Harris at the 4,
Richardson at the 1.
Richardson at the 3, like Thibault and Zaire or Burke or Nato. I want them going small ball.
I want the defensive lineup of death.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Just give me all types of weird shit because this team is going to be in the playoffs. We know who that starting lineup will almost certainly be. We pretty much know more or less who some of the 6th and 7th guys will be. Mm-hmm. We don't know for sure, but we kind of know. But like,
they can handle a couple injuries too. I like the way this team is constructed.
I mean, I'm interested in seeing them, and I don't think that the speculation that they'll be a high 50s win team is crazy.
Yeah, if they're not, something has gone wrong. That's all.
True indeed. Well, I think that wraps up this rainy day, humid afternoon episode of Cookies.
I'm going to go online to see which Democratic politician is draining mid-range jumpers. We just saw
I love cookies.
with that boomer game. See if Yang can outdo them with threes.
Bernie's on the little Papa shot. He doesn't have the tactic down though. It's all volume. It's not about accuracy.
It's all volume. It has to be like you pick up one ball in one hand and shoot with the other constantly.
Yeah, was it an Asian that broke the system?
That's incredible. Yeah, that video's amazing.
I think that's what it was, right? This is like, okay, no one is doing this right anymore.
You don't line up the shot. It's just like
You're
get them up.
You're just throwing basketballs up with both hands.
Yeah. So Bernie, good luck with that.
Yeah. Get some Asians on your team.
Get the Yang Gang.
Lure them away from Yang Gang and get your Papa shot technique sorted out.
Ooh, Bernie Yang Gang ticket.
Really a Hooper's dream.
Hooper's delight.
Cookies.
Cookies.